Hi there. Welcome to another dad and daughter debate where we're looking at young people in the church. My name is Chris.
And I'm Christiana.
So, Christiana, young people in the church, should they be waiting till they're older before they get their say in how the church is run?
No, not at all.
And why is that though? Because quite honestly, in almost any organisation, you need to amass some kind of experience, expertise and wisdom before you're let loose making decisions for other people.
Yeah, and I honestly think that's why so many organisations, are dying out nowadays, to be honest with you. Because maybe in the past that worked, because in society, because of expectations and the world, but the world is very different now. And I actually think that there's a lot that young people have to tell us and to share with us. But also, I think that a lot of the time, young people are very passionate and they're very driven and they want to get things done. Whereas as we start to get older, I think that we get more fed up and we kind of get almost beaten down by the kind of process and the institution, and we know, and sometimes I think as you get older you're more likely to, if you have a great idea, I think you're more likely to kind of go, well, but then I'm going to have to go through this and go through that and go through this. And actually I think that young people have so much passion and drive that a lot of the time they don't care about that, because they have this amazing idea and they want to share it and they want to tell people. And I know from myself, not that I'm old now, but I'm no longer, a young person in the church. And I would say even now at the age of 31 that I am much more cautious when I am kind of coming up with ideas of what I think or the way that I share them. And I actually think that is one of the things that young people have that is so amazing and helpful, is that they have this drive and this determination and this passion. And I think that it would be such a shame to say to them, no, you have to wait till you're older, when they've lost that. It would just be, a real tragedy, I think.
But say in a school, for instance, you wouldn't say let the pupils or the students run the school because they're young people, would you?
But they don't run the school, but you have things like student council, and you do have a push towards including young people in making decisions. And because at the end of the day, the school is there for the young people and the children. So I think it's right that they have a say, even if they're not running it. They're really important people, because they are the ones that are primarily supposed to benefit from a school system. So they should definitely have a say in how it's run and how things are delivered. And I think it would be wrong to say that they shouldn't just because they're young. I don't believe that at all.
And certainly there's sort of precedents in the Bible which talk about the valued place of children and young people. I mean, Jesus pointed to a child and said you have to become like a child to enter the kingdom of heaven. He said, let the little children come to me. If you go into the Old Testament, very interesting passage at the beginning of the book of Jeremiah, where Jeremiah is called to be a prophet, and his protest against responding to that call is he says, I'm too young. Now, we don't know his exact age, but God says, no, you're not too young. He gives him a really heavy task, actually. But he certainly regards himself as being too young. So there is that biblical precedent about valuing the place of children and young people at the centre of God's purposes. But how can we do that in the church? Because actually, we live in a modern society where, in many ways, we can't allow people just to do what they want. We have to protect one another. There are legal ramifications to do with whether you're over or under 18, things like that. So how can we affirm children and young people in the church without getting into sort of hot water and mismanaging that?
Well, I think, from my experience, one of the most important things is actually educating older people on why it's so important to have young people involved, why their voice is so important and what they can bring. Because actually, I think that if it's managed correctly and people work together, I don't think there's any reason why those should be issues. But I think that one of the issues that you come up against a lot is, not all older people, of course, but a lot of the time you will have older people in the church who maybe do have those kind of ideas that, the young people can kind of wait their turn almost. And that can be the barrier to having young people involved. And the problem nowadays, of course, is that if young people don't feel like they're being listened to, they will just leave. So it doesn't work like that anyway. Even if that was a good way to think, which personally I don't think it is, but even if it was, well, it's not going to work, because by then the young person has left the church, by the time they're older. So actually I think that's a good kind of argument for why it's so important that we listen to young people, because the fact is they just won't stick around and it's about respect as well, because the church family is all ages. It's not just older people. We don't have that sort of community, actually. We're a community that's there for everybody. And it doesn't mean you have to give the same responsibility to younger people, of course, but that's about mentoring, and it's about working together, in a wider family, and being sensible about what responsibilities you give to people. So I think that's I think that's important.
So I guess one of the things we're trying to do is acknowledge that younger people look at things in different ways, and we should value and appreciate the perspective that they have alongside the perspective that others have as well. Because as a community, as you said, we're a community of all ages, of all types of people.
Yes, definitely.
So we shouldn't be marginalising any one group, and we should be including all groups, and we should be listening to all groups. But there seems to be a special thing about how spiritually we can almost grow and be more like Jesus and more a part of the kingdom of God if we can relearn to look at things as a child or a young person does.
Yeah.
And that can be quite an exciting prospect, really.
And I have a story about Freddie, my son, your grandson, which I think highlights the way that sometimes children see things in a different way. So he's 5 now. So this was earlier in the year, so he would have been 4. And there's a lot of homeless people where we live. And he asked me about this man that was sitting by the side of the road, and I explained that person doesn't have a home, he doesn't have anywhere to live, so that's where he sleeps. And Freddie immediately was absolutely outraged, and he said, but where will he cook his food? And that was his first thought, was, where does this person cook his food? And I said, well, that's very difficult actually for homeless people. They don't have anywhere to cook their food. And he just said, I know. Why don't we just give them all barbecues? Because then they'd be able to cook food for themselves. And of course, it's a very simplistic idea. But at the same time, I thought to myself, you know what? As an adult, you kind of go like, oh, well, that's a bit ridiculous, because how could we give barbecues to all the homeless? But then you start to think, and you're like, well, actually, why couldn't we come up with that? There are places in the world where they actually have community barbecues that people can just go and use. It's actually not that strange an idea. And I just thought, to Freddie, the first thing was, how can this person have hot food? And immediately came up with a solution. And I think sometimes as adults, we're so stuck on how difficult things are that we would just discount something like that and go, no, that's ridiculous. And I do think that that's one of the great things that children and young people can bring to us, is actually really simple solutions that we just discount as we get older, and we think things are much more complicated. I like that story, because I think it highlights kind of the innocence but also simplicity that children and young people can bring to us.
Out of the mouth of a 5-year-old, which might be a good place to leave it. But if you have thoughts on young people in the church, you can, of course, leave them below.